The book club had its own rhythm. It wasn't the kind of place where people rushed in and out. It was gentle, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Tonight was no different. The room smelled faintly of old paper and coffee grounds, a mixture that always felt strangely comforting to me. Around the long wooden table, voices had softened into farewells, laughter faded into polite goodnights, and the scraping of chairs marked the end of another evening together. One by one, members packed their books into bags and drifted toward the door, leaving behind only the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the lingering warmth of a shared discussion. I should have left too, but something slowed me down. Maybe it was the weight of the story we had just finished, maybe it was the quiet comfort of the space. Or maybe, if I was being honest, it was the way I could feel two particular gazes still on me. Across the table, they lingered. Two women, both in their early 40s, graceful in a way that time had refined rather than diminished. One had dark, wavy hair that fell to her shoulders, a richness that seemed to shine beneath the library's muted lights. The other carried herself with a calm elegance, her hair tied neatly back, a silver glint at her temple catching my attention when she tilted her head to listen. Neither seemed in a hurry to leave, though their bags were packed and their coats rested on the backs of their chairs. There was a subtle tension in the room now, as if the absence of the group had shifted something unspoken into the open. Our earlier conversation, polite, thoughtful, intellectual, now hung between us with a different weight. When my eyes met theirs, the exchange wasn't casual anymore. It was deliberate. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile, and the other raised her brow almost imperceptibly, as if to say she had noticed my hesitation to rise from my seat. I felt my heartbeat shift, quicken, though nothing outwardly had changed. I was still just a man sitting at a table after a book club meeting, still surrounded by stacks of novels and the faint echo of earlier laughter. Yet under the surface, everything felt charged. One of them leaned slightly forward, resting her hand on the table. Her fingers traced absent circles against the wood, though her eyes never left mine. The other tilted her head, her voice soft as she asked me what I had thought of the book's ending. It was a simple question, but the way she asked, her tone gentle, her body angled just slightly toward me, made it feel like more than casual conversation. I answered quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the awareness between us deepening. The room was nearly empty now, only the three of us suspended in this fragile, unspoken pause. Outside, I could hear faint traffic and the rattle of wind against the windows. Inside, though, there was stillness. And in that stillness, I realized something. I wasn't just reluctant to leave. They weren't either. The scrape of the last chair against the floor seemed to signal that the night was truly ending, yet the three of us lingered. The others had already gone, their voices trailing into the hallway, fading until only silence filled the room. For a moment, I thought perhaps we would part ways as usual, polite smiles, a nod, and nothing more. But instead, when I stood and reached for my coat, they rose too, almost in unison. It was subtle, but it felt intentional. We moved together toward the door, the rhythm of our steps oddly matched. The old carpeted floor muffled our footsteps, but I could hear the rustle of fabric as their coats brushed against their skirts, the soft sound of heels tapping in the corridor. Their conversation shifted into something lighter, quieter, though I couldn't help but notice that each time I spoke, they leaned in just a little closer, as if my words were meant for them alone. The hallway smelled faintly of polished wood and the faint trace of perfume. Hers, I realized, drifting between us like an invisible thread. I couldn't tell which one it came from, but it was delicate, floral, grounding. One of them walked to my left, close enough that the sleeve of her wool coat brushed lightly against my arm. It was such a small thing, yet I felt it immediately. The warmth of her presence, the decision not to step further away. I glanced at her, and she caught my look, answering it with the smallest of smiles, her eyes soft, almost playful. On my right, the other woman laughed at something I said about the book, a low, warm laugh that carried more intimacy than the words themselves. She tilted her head back slightly, her hair catching the dim light above us, and when her gaze returned to mine, it lingered. Just long enough to leave me unsettled in the best possible way. The three of us filled that narrow hallway with an energy I hadn't expected. Normally, this was the time of night when people hurried to their cars, keys already in hand, minds elsewhere. But not tonight. The corridor stretched longer than usual, the moments heavier, as though each step was carrying us toward something quietly significant. By the time we reached the building's front door, I realized I hadn't spoken much in the last few moments. Instead, I'd been listening, to their voices, to the subtle rhythm of their presence beside me, to the quiet flutter of something unnamed inside my chest. I opened the door for them, letting the cool night air sweep in. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair and lifted it across her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear with graceful ease, giving me a brief glimpse of vulnerability beneath her composed demeanor. The other woman paused just beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder. We stepped outside together, not as three separate people leaving a meeting, but as though some invisible thread had tied us into the same moment. And though no one spoke of it, I knew we all felt it. The door closed behind us with a soft thud, and the quiet hum of the library gave way to the open night. The air outside was cool, tinged with the faint scent of rain that had passed earlier, leaving the pavement dark and glistening beneath the amber glow of streetlights. For a moment, none of us spoke. We simply stood there, adjusting to the sudden stillness of the parking lot, to the weight of the night pressing in around us. The world felt larger now, but somehow emptier, just the three of us moving into the hush of the evening. Their voices, when they did come, seemed to echo more freely out here, not confined by four walls. One of them drew her coat tighter around herself, her fingers lingering at the buttons as though she was stalling for time. The other tilted her face upward briefly, watching the way the streetlight painted the clouds in shades of pale gold before letting her gaze drift back to me. We began walking again, though our pace was unhurried, as if none of us were eager to break this fragile pause. The sound of our shoes against the damp pavement filled the silence in a rhythm that felt oddly harmonious. I could hear the faint click of her heels beside me, steady and deliberate, matched by the softer step of the other woman. Their presence on either side of me created a kind of cocoon, as though the world beyond the three of us barely existed. The air was crisp, and with every inhale, I caught different fragments of them. Subtle perfume, the warmth of fabric brushed by their movements, even the faintest trace of shampoo as the wind carried it toward me. These weren't overwhelming scents. They were human, intimate, grounding. I felt them as much as I noticed them, the way you notice details only when you're paying attention to someone fully. One of them spoke first, her voice quieter than it had been inside, as though the openness of the night required a gentler tone. She made a small remark about how late it had gotten, her words carrying the suggestion of reluctance, like she wasn't quite ready for the evening to end. The other responded with a soft laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, and I saw something in her expression then, an openness, a flicker of vulnerability that contrasted with the confident way she carried herself inside the meeting. Their coats swayed slightly as they walked, and every so often, our arms nearly touched. It was accidental, but not entirely. Each near contact sent a quiet shiver of awareness through me, the kind you don't admit to feeling but can't ignore. I wondered if they felt it too, if these silences and small glances carried the same weight for them. The parking lot stretched ahead of us, dotted with scattered cars under the glow of lamps. Mine was waiting near the far end, and though it wasn't far, I found myself wishing it were. Every step brought us closer, but also threatened to end this strange, unspoken closeness. And even as the night chilled my skin, I felt a warmth growing stronger between us. Something unspoken, something not yet named, but undeniably there that we reached my car sooner than I wanted. The lot was quiet, the kind of silence that carried its own kind of tension, just the faint hum of a distant street lamp and the soft rustle of the breeze against scattered leaves. My car sat under a pool of yellow light, its metallic surface glinting faintly with the sheen of recent rain. It should have been the moment for goodbyes, the natural break where we'd part ways with polite nods. Yet none of us moved toward that conclusion. Instead, we slowed. Almost instinctively, as if unspoken agreement held us together, the three of us stopped near the car. One of them leaned lightly against the side, her palm trailing absent-minded circles across the cool metal door as though she needed something to do with her hands. The streetlight painted her profile in a soft glow, catching the curve of her cheek and the quiet steadiness in her eyes. The other woman stood closer to me than I expected. Not too close, but close enough that I could feel her presence, warm and deliberate, brushing against the space where comfort meets awareness. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the night air. Something floral, almost faint enough to be missed, yet distinct once I noticed. My breath caught in a way I hoped she didn't hear. The silence between us wasn't awkward, not exactly. It was charged, as if filled with words none of us dared to voice. I caught myself shifting the weight of my keys in my hand, turning the metal pieces over between my fingers, a small anchor against the unfamiliar pull I was feeling. One of them broke the silence with a quiet laugh, a sound that carried no particular reason but seemed meant to ease the moment. It didn't erase the tension. If anything, it sharpened it. Her eyes met mine afterward, lingering just a second too long before drifting away. The other woman tilted her head, studying me, as though weighing whether to say something. When she didn't, her lips pressed into the smallest of smiles, a smile that hinted she already knew what she would have said. The three of us stood in a loose circle under the streetlight, suspended in that delicate pause between staying and leaving. I could feel the damp coolness of the night against my skin, but the nearness of their bodies added a warmth that made the air feel heavier. One of them shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing against mine in what might have been accidental, though the softness of her expression afterward told me it wasn't entirely so. I realized then that this wasn't a casual moment. They hadn't followed me out just for small talk. Something deeper had drawn them to linger here, something unspoken yet undeniably present. And though the rational part of me wanted to find words, the rest of me understood that silence was safer, that the meaning lived not in what we said, but in the way we stood close, beneath the quiet glow of the night, unwilling to part. The pause by my car stretched on longer than it should have, yet none of us seemed eager to break it. The night pressed in softly, the hum of the street lamp above us steady and constant, like a witness to our silence. My breath fogged faintly in the air, rising and dissolving into the glow, and I realized my hand still gripped the keys loosely, though I had no intention of unlocking the door. It was one of them who finally spoke, her voice gentle, threaded with something that felt almost too honest for the setting. "I never know what to do with myself after these meetings," she said, her fingers brushing along the edge of my car as though tracing her thoughts into the metal. "Sometimes it feels strange to just go home." The words hung there, soft but vulnerable, and I could sense the weight beneath them. She wasn't talking about the book anymore. The other woman shifted, nodding slowly, her arms crossed but her expression open. "I know what you mean," she added. "It's easy to get lost in stories, in conversations. And then, when it's over, you're left with—" Her voice trailed off, but her eyes caught mine, finishing the sentence silently. "With emptiness." Something stirred in me at that, an ache of recognition. I'd felt it too, that hollow space after the warmth of connection fades, when you walk alone to your car and drive into the solitude of the night. It was something I never voiced, something I thought was mine alone. But here they were, admitting it, and suddenly the weight I carried didn't feel quite so solitary. I nodded, my voice quieter than usual when I spoke. "I get that, more than I'd like to admit." The woman leaning on the car let out a soft exhale, as if my words gave her permission to release something she'd been holding in. Her gaze lingered on me, steady and searching, and I felt it down to my chest. The other woman's lips curved into a faint smile, not playful this time, but understanding, like she knew exactly where my thoughts had gone because hers were already there. For a few seconds, none of us said anything more. Instead, there was only the night, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the quiet cadence of our breathing. And yet, that silence carried more truth than any words could. Then she, the one with her arms folded, unfolded them slowly, her hand brushing briefly against my sleeve as she did. It was such a fleeting touch, but it pulled me closer to her in ways I couldn't name. "That's why I stay behind sometimes," she confessed, her tone almost a whisper. "Not because of the books. Because of the people." Her meaning wasn't hidden, not anymore. I swallowed against the sudden dryness in my throat, my heart beating in a rhythm that felt louder than the night around us. And in that fragile space, with both of them looking at me with something unspoken in their eyes, I realized the book club wasn't what had truly kept any of us there. It was this quiet, unexpected intimacy that had found us beneath the streetlight, daring us to admit what none of us had planned to say. The night had grown heavy with quiet truths. What began as lingering conversation was now something else, an intimacy that neither words nor silence could quite contain. I could feel it in the way they stood near me, in the way their eyes didn't dart away, but instead held mine with a quiet steadiness. One of them shifted slightly, as though gathering courage, and then her hand reached out, resting lightly on my arm. The touch was simple, almost casual, yet the warmth of her palm against the fabric of my sleeve felt startlingly personal. Her fingers pressed just enough for me to feel their shape, not gripping, not hesitant, just there grounding me. My breath caught before I could steady it. She spoke then, though her voice was softer than before. It's nice, not having to feel alone in that thought. Her thumb brushed unconsciously over my arm as she said it, a gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed, if not for the way it made the space between us thrum with quiet meaning. Before I could respond, the other woman stepped a fraction closer, her shoulder brushing mine. The contact was light, fleeting, but the effect lingered. My chest tightened at the sensation, the warmth of her body so close, the faint tickle of her hair catching in the night breeze and brushing against me. She didn't apologize or move away. Instead, she held her position beside me, her presence speaking more clearly than words could. For a few seconds, the world seemed to still around us. The sound of distant cars blurred into background noise, and all I could focus on was the layered closeness. The warmth on my arm, the subtle press of her shoulder, the mingling sense of perfume and rain-damp night air. My heart beat unsteadily, not from nerves exactly, but from the strange, undeniable pull of connection. I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, a shaky exhale that made one of them smile faintly. Her eyes softened, and in that look was a mixture of reassurance and vulnerability, as though she, too, was surprised by how natural this felt. No one spoke for a while. We simply stood there, letting touch do what words couldn't. The woman beside me shifted slightly closer, her coat brushing mine now, the edge of her hand just grazing my own, as though testing the boundary of how much closeness could be allowed. The one still holding my arm didn't pull away. If anything, her hand grew steadier, as if to say she wasn't ready to let go. It struck me then how rare this was, how carefully we usually hide the need for touch, the longing to be near someone. And yet here we were, outside in a quiet parking lot, letting the night hold the secret for us. The moment was delicate, fragile, but it was real. And as I stood between them, feeling the warmth of their closeness, I realized I didn't want the night to end. Time has a way of slipping when silence says more than words. I don't know how long we stood there, the three of us suspended under the glow of the streetlight. My car was at my back, their closeness on either side of me, the cool night air threading between us yet softened by the warmth they carried. It felt like we had wandered into a pause in time, neither here nor there, not quite leaving, not quite staying. Eventually, though, the truth pressed in. The night couldn't hold us forever. One of them shifted first, her hand finally sliding from my arm, though not abruptly. She let it linger as if reluctant to part, her fingers brushing slowly down the sleeve of my coat before falling away. The faint trail of warmth she left behind pulsed through me, even in its absence. The other woman gave a quiet sigh, the kind that comes when you're not ready for something to be over. She tilted her face toward me, and for a brief, suspended moment, I thought she might lean in further. Instead, her hand reached out and found mine. Her fingers pressed into my palm, a gentle squeeze, firm enough to be real, tender enough to be careful. My throat tightened at the gesture, at the deliberate intimacy of it. I returned the squeeze, wordlessly, knowing no words could have captured the simplicity of what passed between us in that touch. Her eyes softened. "Thank you for tonight." She didn't mean the book discussion, I could tell. The words carried a weight that reached beyond pages and plots. The other woman leaned closer then, her cheek brushing lightly against mine as she whispered her own goodbye. Her skin was cool from the night air, soft as it touched mine for just a moment. The faintest trace of her perfume clung to me afterward, lingering as if she had left a piece of herself behind. None of this was rushed. Every movement, every gesture, unfolded as though carefully chosen, tender and deliberate. And when they both stepped back, their smiles weren't the easy, social smiles of acquaintances. They were heavier, layered with something we didn't need to explain. I nodded, my own smile faint but sincere. "Good night," I managed, though the word felt too small for what had just happened. They turned together, their coats catching the light as they walked toward their cars. I stayed by mine, watching them go, my chest still tight with the warmth of their closeness. The lot was quiet again, but it wasn't the same emptiness I had expected. There was something left behind, an invisible thread stretching between us, even as the distance grew. When I finally slid into the driver's seat, I didn't start the engine right away. My hands rested on the wheel, still remembering the weight of her fingers in mine, the softness of a cheek against my own. The night air slipped in through the crack of the window, carrying faint echoes of laughter, perfume, and the warmth of shared solitude. For the first time in a long while, driving home alone didn't feel quite so lonely.